Hello and welcome this evening to Be Heard TV. I'm your host, Isaac Carlson. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about political scandals in the White House. From an early age, we're taught that lying, cheating, and stealing are wrong. However, it seems that sometimes even the most trusted and prestigious leaders in politics fail at these on a very basic level. So tonight, as always, we are broadcasting from the Youth Entity Center in Carbondale, Colorado, in front of a live audience. And the live audience, I encourage you guys, if you have input or questions during the show, you can come up to our audience microphone and chime in. Those of you who are watching on our live stream on our Be Heard TV Facebook page can also contribute. All you have to do is simultaneously post on our Facebook page as you're watching. But without further ado, allow me to introduce our student panelists who are joining me here at the studio for the evening. Felix, would you start?
My name is Felix Jimenez. I'm from Glenwood Springs, and this is my third episode on Be Heard TV.
My name's Claire McKenna. I'm from Glenwood Springs High School, and my favorite movie is Angels and Demons.
My name's Emily Brule. I'm from Roaring Fork High School, and this is my first time on the show.
My name is David Wood. I go to Basalt High School, and I just love the sound of my own voice.
All right, good facts. Thank you all for joining me tonight. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Also joining me tonight for the first time, Be Heard is featuring some Skype guests who are going to be participating in our conversation tonight, and they are joining us live via Skype from Louisiana. Would you guys introduce yourselves?
Hello, everyone. I'm Mason Dolphin. I'm in Hahnville in Luling, Louisiana. I'm a local musician with a passion for science.
I'm Christian Bro, Luling, Louisiana, and me and Isaac did not coordinate these vests.
Good one. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Mason and Christian, for joining us tonight. Just remember, you guys, chime in at any time, and we want to include you in the conversation as much as possible. So, starting out the show tonight, we're going to talk about kind of the rise in political scandals in the U.S. over time. This next piece of information comes from obviously the most reliable and objective source, Wikipedia. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. This information is subjective. We're going to be talking about the sheer number of scandals over time. I looked at a list of political scandals in U.S. history online, and it noted 194 largely publicized federal political scandals in the United States. What was interesting about it is that 139 out of those 194, or 72% of them, occurred within the last 50 years or the last 10 administrations. So the first question that I'm going to open it up with is why is there the rise in these political scandals? Is this because they're simply being reported more, because the media is more vigilant, has better technology, or is it really just that morals are becoming worse over time in the White House?
No, Isaac, it's, as I've said before, it's never one catalyst. In my opinion, it's multiple things. It's, first of all, our politicians, our representatives, feel as though there's no consequence for acting whichever way they'd like. They're people in power, and they feel as though if Bill Clinton can get away with his actions, if anybody in the past has gotten away with their actions, I can do it because, I'm in the same playing field. And at the same time, it is because we have, much more news every day. We're seeing people on TV. There's the internet now, which wasn't around 20 years ago. So we just know about it more. So I think it's a combination of the both. It's not any one thing.
Well, also there's a sense of minding your own business that was really strong in earlier centuries that we've seemed to have lost somewhat.
Well, again, that would tie into just the media kind of putting things forth more.
And I think it's almost become easier, like you said, to get away with things, and that our politicians feel as though they have this ultimate power and that nothing can touch them. And we've seen that over the years. People commit what we'd consider scandals, and they don't get punished for them, and therefore they think they can continue to get away with them.
Well, you're saying that politicians these days can get away with scandals more. Has there always been that sense that once you're in power, you're able to get away with more, or do you think that that's more of a recent development?
I think it's more of a recent development. I think that in the past, when there was a big political scandal, there were bigger consequences, and now that scandals are a dime a dozen, the consequences aren't as high, and therefore people feel like they can get away with it.
Also, Isaac, during the time, 70, 100 years ago, people didn't have clear-cut examples of a politician getting away with these kind of acts. So since they never knew it to be true, maybe they thought like, I'm in power, I could probably get away with this, but they never had an instance to look back on and say, well, that happened 10 years ago, that happened 5 years ago. They were a little more hesitant to act like that. They were maybe a little more reserved than they are currently.
So where did the change come around then, I guess is the question. Where was this change in mentality from not being able to get away with something to being able to get away with scandals?
A general acceptance kind of became popular, where if somebody did something, it's their business, let them live their life. You can't really legislate morals, but at the same time, I think we need to hold these people accountable. They are our representatives, and if they're representing us, we want them to represent the best part of us, not all of our flaws.
And if we have these people who are in power with these flaws, what is that going to teach us for our younger generations? Are we going to teach them that that's okay? Are we telling them that that's the best thing and we can get away with that and that's okay? And we don't want that at all.
But I still think that the fact that these people are representatives, and yes, they should represent the best that we have. However, they're still people, and I think that seeing the fact that they make mistakes is important so that we can relate to them as the people that they represent.
But again, these aren't just any people. They're not just any one person. These are people who've taken it upon themselves to represent their fellow man. In doing that, you need to make certain self-sacrifices. Some of those maybe being not having extramarital affairs, kind of sticking to some core American beliefs, because that is what you're meant to represent, at least while you're in office. As soon as you're out, you can do whatever you want. But as long as you're being paid by the government to do a job that, is really important, you need to have some stronger morals.
But we elect them because, for example, we think Obama is going to be the best president of the United States, not the best husband to his wife.
We kind of feel as though they should be one and the same, because a man who's going to be the best president is going to be an amazing husband, because he wants to kind of show the entire country what it takes to have a good marriage.
Well, is that what his focus is? Not getting rid of terrorism, but showing the country what a good marriage is?
Well, it should be part of it. You can't be single-minded when you're the president.
So, Felix, correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing that you're kind of saying is you're saying that you're trying to kind of explicate that when you take on the responsibility of being a politician, someone in power, you give up a certain right to make the same sort of mistakes that you would accept with someone who's not in power, and you're kind of saying that sense of duty has changed over the years? Is that what you're saying?
I am saying that has changed. I feel like people are more accepting of a politician's mistakes because that politician is so aware that everybody's making mistakes. But we should hold them to a high bar, because when we do that, they succeed more. And I think in doing that, we kind of create a goal for ourselves as a country that if we hold our politicians to that, perhaps we can start holding ourselves to that bar as well.
But who decides that standard? I mean, like, you can say that an extramarital affair by most Americans is considered wrong, but where does that standard lie? We have this separation between church and state, and I feel like a lot of those morals that you're talking about come from basic religious beliefs, and I think that there's it's a little hypocritical to hold our politicians to those standards, even though they're not supposed to follow church law.
Well, that's a bit of a universal belief within our country that we should be faithful in our marriages and in our relationships. I don't think it is solely held to religion, because there are people who are atheists who hold those beliefs.
But earlier, Felix, you said that you would have to make sacrifices when you become a politician. I mean, we're talking about extramarital affairs. We shouldn't have to sacrifice that. That should be inherent in our values, so we shouldn't be making sacrifice. Oh, well, I guess I have to be faithful to my wife now that I'm the president.
Well, I mean, that's obviously the best thing we could have, but that's a little naive to say that everybody's going to have that. But if maybe you have that belief going into office, you should stop for 4 years so you can, kind of convey a good image for the rest of the world, because you're representing an entire country of people.
All right, good points. We've talked a little bit here about kind of what has caused a recent uptick in scandals. Since we're talking about the recent uptick, I think to put it into a little perspective, we're going to talk about some of the bigger scandals that have come about in the past year. And where we're going to start is we're going to talk a bit about the attack on Benghazi in Libya. We're going to roll a short video that's kind of summative of the events. I do need to put a disclaimer on this video. This video, we talked actually last show, anyone who watched our last show, we talked about spin doctors, and we talked about advocacy journalism being presented as fact. So I'm going to take some steps towards what we decided we wanted for the future on that show, and put a disclaimer on this video saying this is very subjective content. It's very biased. It was created by a super PAC for the Republican Party, and the only reason that we're choosing to roll this video is just because it's the best one we could find that had a good summation of the events surrounding the attack on Benghazi. We did edit out some of the inaccuracies in there, so all the content is accurate, but I still want to put that disclaimer before we roll the video. But that being said, let's go ahead and watch the clip.
In the months before his death, Ambassador Stevens talked about being worried about what he called the never-ending security threats in Benghazi, specifically mentioned the rise in Islamic extremism, the growing al-Qaeda presence in Libya, and said he was on an al-Qaeda hit list.
September 11, 2012. An American ambassador is brutally murdered. 3 other Americans killed. An organized assault with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. A security request submitted 4 months earlier, denied, even after 2 bombings preceding the anniversary of 9/11. And fears of being killed expressed by Ambassador Stevens himself. Within hours of the attacks, Obama officials received numerous intelligence reports indicating the attacks were organized. Communications intercepted between al-Qaeda and Libyan militants, bragging about the attack. Every sign pointed to terrorism. For political reasons, it was in Obama's interest to not portray the attack as terrorism on the anniversary of 9/11.
So that video, again, as I said, subjective, but we did edit it out to take out some of the more biased content, just kind of summarizing some of the events that surrounded Benghazi. The reason that it's considered such a scandal, there were a lot of misconceptions surrounding the attack. It was initially reported by Representative to the UN, Susan Rice, that the attack on Benghazi was the result of a video that caused some riots in Cairo. It's called The Innocence of Muslims, and as information was further developed, it was revealed that actually it had nothing to do with the riot, nothing to do with the video, and instead was in fact a terrorist attack on the consulate in Benghazi. So we have a little clip about the controversy concerning the video. I'd like to go ahead and roll that clip just to put that into context as well.
This was not a pre-planned, premeditated attack. That what happened initially was that it was a spontaneous reaction to what had just transpired in Cairo as a consequence of the video.
State Department officials on that conference call October 9th confirmed there were no protests outside the Benghazi consulate before the attack. 0. And, quote, everything was calm from video surveillance and security officials there.
Okay, so that's one side of the big snafu that was surrounding the Benghazi attack. The other half of it is that, and the first video was talking about this a little bit, that a lot of requests for help were sent from the consulate in Benghazi. There were several attacks leading up to the attack that was on September 11th that caused them to request extra security there, and the security was never sent. Their request was denied. So there was a lot of controversy around that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to you guys now, starting off the main question. How big a scandal do you consider this?
I consider this a large scandal solely because Susan Rice's talking points had been edited by somebody in the White House. The purpose of that editing, currently I don't know. Could have been a number of things, political reasons, or it could have just been for the fact that they didn't want to say something that would later be disproven. I feel as though this is a big issue that we were lied to, not because the entire government conspired to lie to us, but an individual within the government. Regardless of who it was, they went unchecked. And that's a scary fact when somebody within the government goes unchecked, regardless of who it is. It could be a secretary. But if it's a secretary who had that kind of power and they weren't checked, again, that's just frightening to me.
But when that happens, I mean, can you really blame the entire administration for this one person that went unchecked? That's where the fault lies, is everyone's kind of pointing fingers at the Obama administration. If you're saying it was just one person, is it really that big of a scandal then?
Well, it's a large scandal because, again, the Obama administration or even Susan Rice didn't take the time out of their day to make sure that these talking points were accurate. Without a doubt, they would have had the resources to go and check the validity of these before they went and, announcing it to the entire world, this is what happened, for sure. But again, maybe that somebody did check it, and the person who checked it was the one who changed it. So I feel as though the fact it could go so far as to come to the public's eye without being altered means that somebody wasn't doing their job, or groups of people weren't doing their job, especially if it was one individual getting away with this.
One of the reasons I consider it to be one of the bigger scandals is because it's not about like an extramarital affair or something. It's about a threat to our nation, and the fact that an ambassador was killed, and the fact that we don't have accurate information that was said to the American public afterwards is a big deal. It's no longer just a petty affair. It's a big deal.
All right, so you guys are talking a lot about, kind of who the responsibility falls upon in this particular circumstance. I want to roll a quick video that shows Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State at the time, her response to what happened in Benghazi, and then I'd like to talk a little bit more about where the responsibility does fall. But first, let's go ahead and roll that clip.
Again, we were misled that there were supposedly protests, and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact. And the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make? It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again, Senator.
There are many questions that are unanswered. And the answers, frankly, that you've given this morning are not satisfactory to me. Why is it that the administration still refuses to provide the full text of emails regarding the deletion of references to Al-Qaeda and terrorism and the talking points? Why do we care? Because if the classified information had been included, it gives an entirely different version of events.
But there were a lot of human errors. These are judgment errors, and the people who make judgment errors need to be replaced, fired, and no longer in a position of making these judgment calls. Had I been president at the time, and I found that you did not read the cables from Benghazi, you did not read the cables from Ambassador Stevens, I would have relieved you of your post. I think it's inexcusable.
So the opening question that arises kind of from that video is, where does the responsibility for this lie? Does it fall on the Secretary of State, who is in charge of thousands of employees? Is it her responsibility to have read those? Is it the responsibility of the middle-ranking person who actually was the one who denied those claims? Is it the responsibility of the president, who's in charge of foreign affairs on a larger scale? So I want to bring in our friends from Louisiana. So if I could start this question with you guys, get your input, that would be awesome.
I mean, I actually think it's everyone's fault in the Obama administration, because they're choosing to withhold information from the people, and that's not going to resolve anything. Of course, it's going to be a big scandal because they're keeping something as big as terrorism away from us. And the irony of it kind of falling on September 11th, I do get why they chose to hide it, but I don't think it's right that they did.
I think there was a large part in what Hillary Clinton said. She made a point to almost ignore. While I can't accept that, I think it would be more of a matter of not pointing fingers at each other, because we don't need a video to blame. We don't need anything. After a while, we do get the facts, and I don't necessarily think it's a conspiracy to, try and find something to blame or to get inappropriate or incorrect information. After a while, we just have to look at the facts and accept that there is somewhere to go and that more defensive administration can be put into place. So there is a way to look at this, but we just need to stop pointing fingers at a certain point.
Well, Isaac, I really need to counter that, because he had said that we need to stop pointing fingers, but then Clinton herself said we need to make sure this never happens again. But if our Secretary of State is misinformed the day after a terrorist attack, I think that we can't prevent this. If there's that much confusion within the government, if somebody is being misled, especially our Secretary of State, then there's an issue that needs to be solved as far as intelligence goes. Because these emails that Clinton had that have been hacked and now put to the public show she was misinformed the day after the attack and was told that it was just a random YouTube video that caused this, the innocence of Muslims. So we do need to establish who it is that was causing or putting forth these lies, because we can go to them, relieve them of their duties to ensure that we get only accurate information, especially that our officials get accurate information to make informed decisions and allow the public to understand what's happening.
Right.
Well,
That's
absolutely.
why I have such a problem with people who are choosing to blame the Obama administration for this, because they were misinformed, and granted that's not right and we should figure out where that came from, but you can't blame someone who is misinformed when the government has to trust, they have to trust where they're getting their information from. They can't double check everything. It would just simply take too much time. So people who are continuing to blame the Obama administration for simply relying on sources, they were simply misinformed. That's not a fault.
Claire, I do agree with you. We shouldn't blame the Obama administration solely, but they do have a duty to, at this point especially, find out who was giving them this false information and fix the problem. That is their job at this point, to make sure that their sources, because they know who gives them their information better than any other person, better than I do especially, go to that person and say, why was this information faulty? And if it isn't a genuine reason, relieve them and have somebody else in there who's going to do their job correctly.
But you also have to look at the fact, before we even showed the clip, we had to give a disclaimer on it. So the people we deem professional, it's also definitely a matter of, even the professionals that we do trust, it's a matter of bias. And there is a point of blame that we do have to edit it out, and it was great to have, an unbiased video with nothing but the facts. And I really think that's what we need to focus on, not one political party taking the facts and mending them in their sides to point fingers as well.
Well, to be fair, the CIA isn't going to give an opinion. The CIA is going to give every single aspect, and every single point of view that can be fathomed. I mean, if you can think of a situation, they're going to give you the facts. They're not going to say, like, this is what I think this means. They're going to say, this is what this means, and then here's the 10 experts' opinions on it. They're going to give the broadest, just not even vague, but definite answer as to what is occurring. And I don't think that you can say that happened for the White House, that the White House got biased information. They get information. Anybody after that point is the one who makes it biased.
Oh, I'm not saying that they have received biased information. I'm just saying whenever we show clips like this, and that's how we try and portray it to others, whenever we do have to give disclaimers, then we do have to worry about the information that's being put out.
And I'm glad that you brought up that point, because that's one of the hardest things surrounding researching these things is trying to find, because there are so many different versions of what happened, especially regarding Benghazi, and there are so many different these opinionated things, like, for example, the video that you were talking about, I had to give the disclaimer before we rolled it. It becomes very difficult to find the truth in these circumstances. I want to go ahead and roll on to the next recent scandal. We're only going to talk about one more, and then we're going to go into some more general conversation. But I want to touch briefly on Petraeus' sex scandal that happened earlier. Petraeus was having an extramarital affair with a woman last name Broadmoor. And the bigger concern there than even the affair was that she was found with classified military information in her home. So I want to get some of your guys' input on that scandal as well.
Isaac, I feel like this scandal, although at face value seems just like something that happened with Bill Clinton, where the implications weren't as great as we may conceive them to be. But upon further review, I think we can really establish that this is an issue. If she had classified information, this was a woman who was working with the head of the CIA. If this man could be blackmailed for this relationship because maybe his career meant that much to him, then the United States could be losing valuable information. The United States could be giving out false information to its heads, its representatives, that is. That's something that's serious. This is the reason we need to have our politicians and the people in power holding strong morals. Because when they hold strong morals, they're not going to be in situations like this. They're not going to be in the situation where they could be blackmailed. Instead, they're on the straight and narrow. And in this case, had he been on the straight and narrow, it would have led to maybe a little more success in his career and just his intelligence career.
Felix, simply because he had an extramarital affair, I don't think is the issue here. The issue is the fact that she had this classified information. You're saying that all these people that are on the straight and narrow and on the moral high ground, they don't find themselves in this situation. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is how we're keeping our information classified, and the fact that it's so easy for someone who doesn't have qualifications to have this information. How she got it, I don't think is relevant.
I think being in a relationship with the head of the CIA could get you some classified information. So I feel as though if they weren't in this relationship, she probably wouldn't have had the power she did. They shared an email, and I'm pretty sure she had hacked his Gmail to send people messages. she obviously had too much power, and his mind was clattered about the reality of the situation. If he maybe wasn't having this affair with her, he would have cut it off immediately when he began to feel as though she was using him, and he would have been more focused on his job as opposed to what he was doing.
All right, we've been talking a lot here about kind of the significance of these scandals. I think it's interesting that we've kind of brought up the scandals that we've talked about are more significant, or these ones where it actually involves a threat to national security or that sort of thing. However, it seems as though the nation on whole takes a different approach, and most of the media is regarding sex scandals. We have a quick video about kind of the popularization of sex scandals, and then once we finish rolling that, I kind of want to talk about why we make bigger deals out of certain scandals versus others, and we'll go into some of that conversation. But first, let's roll the clip.
Politicians make mistakes too.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Ms. Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong.
Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be counting down 10 of the most infamous political sex scandals.
It was someone sending a picture of a wiener on Wiener's account.
So you can kind of see there, the way that it's kind of been popularized in our media and how much of an emphasis they put on sex scandals. So I kind of want to talk just first of all with you guys, and actually I want to go to our friends joining us from Louisiana as well, about which scandals you view as more consequential than others. So actually I'm going to start with you two, and then I'll come back to our four panelists who are here.
All right, well, the first thing I'd like to bring up is that I do think whenever it comes to morals and it comes to these scandals, that there is a matter of keeping your private and then your professional life separate. Now, whenever you're dealing with classified information with CIA or anything, that's whenever these two fields start to clash, and that becomes a problem, because that's whenever these scandals arise, whenever classified information is being passed through people's personal lives rather than professional lives. I find a lot of politicians are grilled on their personal lives because of whether they be these sex scandals, which they mean to keep in their personal life and not at all affect their professional life or whatever title they may hold. But the simple matter is sometimes they do manage to get clashed together, and they do end up affecting each other. So while some are able to keep these separate, and unfortunately for them, they are exposed to the media, and they are shown as whether they be bad politicians or low moral people instead. It is very important for these people to hold a certain moral standard whenever it comes to their professional life.
I mean, well, of course, it all comes back to the media, I think, on how they portray situations. But it also comes back to the people. Like, media is they're going to show what the people want to see. And the people don't want to hear about terrorism and all this stuff. They want to hear about, like, what people say, sex sells. And they're going to want to hear about the sex scandals. They want the gossip, pretty much. I mean, that's just what we've come to recently.
All right, how about you guys here joining me in the studio?
Isaac, there's a naive part of me that wants to believe that the reason the media is trying to popularize these sex scandals is so that we can get to know these politicians who are representing us that we never get to meet. We get to know what type of people they are through their actions. But that naivety is dangerous, because I come to realize that that is not the situation. Like he's saying, what sells is sex, drugs, and alcohol. And that is what they're trying to put on the news. When we covered the media, that was one of the things we kind of discovered, that these people need to get this out there. And they've realized the only way to have their station be popular is have what people want to hear. So the sex scandals are publicized not because they have value, although they sometimes do, but because they can sell viewership. People will want to watch it because they're the station that has the sex scandal surrounding Clinton, the sex scandal surrounding Petraeus. But the sad part is we should be viewing these because we need to know who these people are, who the core person within them is, so we can know whether or not we should trust them with our money, with our safety, and with our future.
All right, Claire, I'll go to you next.
Well, in my opinion, these sex scandals don't have much value at all. Like Felix said, I think they're just out there because they sell. Whether or not what they do in their personal life, I don't think affects how they do their job. And as long as they're doing their job to a standard that we believe to be appropriate, then what they do in their personal lives, as long as it doesn't affect national security or whatnot, it doesn't matter.
Well, we've seen so many times when their personal lives do affect their professional lives. Petraeus, perfect example. In just the fact that that'll affect his professional life, something from his personal life, we need to be aware of this. And to be aware of this is to understand what could come about. We need to make informed decisions. We don't want to vote for a president, president who's going to put somebody like Petraeus in power, especially when his personal decisions are causing such harm for the entire country. So I think to completely ignore these sex scandals because they can be, viable for us to understand what this person might do while they're in power would be ludicrous.
All right, I want to get to David and Emily as well. Can you guys go ahead and kind of talk about which comes down more significant to you, which type of scandal?
Sure. I think that definitely the Benghazi scandal was it should be more important, to say the least, simply because we're talking about people's lives and people dying. And so I think that really trumps the Petraeus scandal simply because we're talking about people not acting when they should have, and it could have saved people's lives. And so I think that's definitely that negligence in the Obama administration somewhere in there. You can't really blame the entire administration like we spoke about before, but I think that's definitely the bigger scandal, even though it does seem a lot more fun to talk about Petraeus and his sex scandal and what he did, and I think it kind of goes back to this moral decline that we used to care about what really matters, but now it really comes down to what's fun to hear about, what's more interesting, what's going to get the most views. And I've heard the term junk politics because we just eat up what's gossipy and what's fun for us to hear about.
Well, I think the bottom line about scandals is that we're electing a president to be a president, not to be a husband to his wife, a father to his kids. We pick our husband because we think he's going to be faithful. We pick our president because we think he's going to be dutiful to the country, not necessarily to his wife. So that's the type of scandal that's more important.
I'd like to address a few things. First, I don't believe that Benghazi is any less important than Petraeus' scandal, and I don't think Petraeus' scandal is more important than the Benghazi scandal. I think that's far more important, but I'm saying that this scandal isn't just trash. It's something that helps us understand this man. And again, we live in a competitive environment. We don't have to choose the man who's just going to be the great leader, yet fail to have any morals and just tell all the kids they should go smoke cigarettes. Fortunately, we live in a big enough country we can choose the perfect candidate. We can choose the one man we know is going to do the job better than anybody else. The only question is whether that man is going to put his foot forth. And if he doesn't, there's always somebody out there who's going to put their foot forth who they may know a thing or two about military strategy, but when it comes to running the economy, maybe when it comes to having good morals as to what they should do with their family, they're lacking. So I think we shouldn't have to choose. We shouldn't say that we'll choose a man who's just a good president in this aspect. We need a more complete man than what we're currently allowing ourselves to accept.
See,
well, when you talk
Felix,
about
I disagree with you on that. I think that every person makes mistakes, and where they don't fault in maybe morality, they fault somewhere else. You're never going to have the perfect person who has the perfect morals, who's the perfect president, who does all these things perfectly. And if I had to choose between a president who couldn't lead and a president who had a sex scandal, I'd pick a president that had a sex scandal.
I'm going to interrupt this up here just for a second because we've got some input from the audience, and I would like to hear from you.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of prominent political figures today are really independent people, and that's a quality in them that they strive for. And that's something that I think all good leaders have, is a sense of independence. And I think instilled with us from the beginning of, the establishment of American society, we've been told that we need to grow up and find a spouse and be faithful to them. But I'm wondering, why can't there be politicians that are just single? That way they don't have any of those moral commitments. Because clearly, being that powerful, you have this, this strong sense of independence. So I don't understand why we can't have some politicians that can remain single, because I feel like they're being pressured into marrying somebody for power or status or whatever. And I think if we had single politicians, it would eliminate some of this this problem, because if somebody was a player, then they could do whatever they want without having the the said ethical implications of that they're expected to have. So
that's an interesting
point. Well, whenever you say
a lot of this stems from. That rather it stems a lot from the pressure into marriage rather than the actual unfaithfulness, the result.
Well, granted, these politicians may value independence, but they're representing a country who says, united we stand, divided we fall. So they're going to be somebody who is big on allegiances. So they're going to maybe carry that into their personal life. And also, people aren't going to vote for a politician they can't relate with. And who are most Americans going to relate with? Maybe somebody who's married, somebody who has a family to take care of, because they're going to be like, hey, he's like me. He's just trying to get by, take care of his kids. I'm doing the exact same thing. So a lot of it could even just be political, getting elected. And I don't think we're going to elect single politicians, especially because these people are older. I mean, you have to be 35 to run for president. So you're going to be at least in your 40s. So I think that they're going to be married by then, and they're definitely going to have a sense of allegiance. Independence, definitely. But that's for drive, not that doesn't carry into the way in which they kind of interact with other people.
So we talked a little bit about here about significance of scandals, and it kind of seems across the board in general that we're trying not to value the sexual scandals as much. Felix, you kind of countered that when it affects careers and affects ability to do a job. I want to talk a little bit about the significance, because oftentimes these sex scandals seem to be costing politicians their jobs. And people, we've been talking earlier, that if they're doing their job fine, it really shouldn't affect actually what they're actually like their career. If they're doing a good job but their personal morality is questionable, it shouldn't actually affect what they're doing. So actually my technical director, Quentin Henry, and I are going to try something a little new here. I'm going to try and send him a little video from my iPhone here. Earlier, he and I were talking, and I did a little personal research. It's not very scientific, but if you Google, or I'm sorry, if you actually go on YouTube, this is what I did, and you search for U.S. scandals, these over here are the top results. These are the top results for what shows up regarding those scandals. And as you can see, almost all of these are sex scandals. Some of them are political sex scandals. Some of them are celebrity sex scandals. So basically all that we're talking about with these, we're talking about the significance comes down to the sex scandals and the celebritizing of it over the actual abilities to do their job, which we were talking about earlier. So I'll go to our friends from Louisiana first on this question, and the opening question I want to ask you guys: if it doesn't affect someone's job, should their personal character and scandals result in the end of that career?
I don't think it should. Their personal and professional life should coincide, because I mean, look how Bill Clinton was. He was a great president. He got a lot accomplished, but people remember him for his sex scandal, and it's a lot of the reason that's because we look up to these people and we have this high standard that we feel that they should be able to exceed. But once they do something wrong, we feel the need to tear them down and to like, oh yeah, he's not the person we thought he was, so he obviously shouldn't be president.
And I also feel that the people in office that we feel are acting in these sex scandals or betrayal of marriage or whatever it may be, that's also our fault, because we have to realize that during elections we look for a few key phrases such as family man or whatever it may be, and we cling to these things. Whenever we hear something like family man, we imagine our set characteristics of whatever it may be, whether it may be faithful to their wife or good to their children or whatever it is. We assume these characteristics and we don't question them any further. So whenever I think it comes to the morality of the people that we elect, it's also a huge part of our fault, because we don't go deep enough. We use these broad terms during elections, and we just assume that they feel the exact way we do because they're using the same terminology. So I do think that during elections we should be more specific and how we approach potential candidates on how they will act. But as far as personal relations go, as long as it doesn't affect a president's professional appeal or sight by the country, I think it can be left alone. But unfortunately, as media, we do prey on the scandals or what we determine as scandals, and we cling to these things and we don't forget them. And I do think it's a huge part on the media, but it's also a huge part on us because we hear what we want to hear, frankly.
All right. It sounds to me like we've kind of come to a general consensus here that as long as it doesn't affect their career, it shouldn't be considered as big a deal as these issues where people are, being lied to within the administration and the government. I'm actually gonna bring this to a bit of a broader scale now with a segment on Be Heard that we call Eye to Eye. The purpose of Eye to Eye is to kind of bring in opinions from other parts of the world, other parts of the country. I'm really glad that we've had the Skype guests on actually to add to that kind of goal tonight. But I want to even broaden it a little further, talk about the significance of scandals across the world. Because we've talked about how it seems like these sex scandals become more significant in our culture. So we're going to roll a quick clip that shows 3 other countries and kind of the scandals that they perceive as more or less important. They're going to talk about France, where in France sex scandals aren't considered as big of a deal. It's going to show a little clip about Kenya. In Kenya, bribery particularly of the police officials is kind of a commonplace sort of thing. It's fairly typical. And then we'll show that in contrast to China, where bribery can result in the death penalty. So let's go ahead and just roll that clip really quick.
In France, people tend to ignore politicians' sexual escapades, or in some cases just accept them.
Once in a while, officers will pretend to be checking vehicles. This conductor tried to escape without paying his bribe, but was swiftly dealt with. Realizing this sport had become too familiar, the cops moved elsewhere where the music went on.
Wayne could face life in jail on the defection charge, while bribery charges can mean the death penalty.
So that just kind of gives you a bit of a glimpse at, the significance that different nations hold for these different scandals. As I was explaining, in France, sex scandal isn't as big a deal. In Kenya, bribery is kind of commonplace, whereas in China, it can result in the death penalty. So the opening question that I'm going to start with is why do these scandals have different significance in different places across the world?
I think, Isaac, what is emphasized in each country kind of shows what they value, what their values are. In the United States, we value the American dream, where you're married, you have 2 kids and a house with 2 cars. And if somebody kind of veers away from that path, we catch them doing that action. Perhaps in Kenya, it's not so important that people are held to the law, it's just that they're fed. Maybe in France, it's not so important that they're not having sexual escapades, but instead that they're, enjoying wine. I think that it kind of highlights each country's values. And here in the United States, we highlight our values through that. What we express the most is hopefully what we don't believe in, what we're trying to fix and solve. And I hope that's the case. Maybe it's not. And in these countries, maybe those are things that they're trying to fix and that they're trying to solve. If they don't believe that bribery is that big of an issue, that's good for them. They're trying to fix their country in another place. Maybe they're trying to decrease poverty. Here we're trying to fix an issue that for us is the deterioration of core American values. And I think that's one thing that, if anything positive, that comes from the media kind of exploiting this.
I also think that America, we're a lot more focused on character than a lot of other countries. Our fondest story of a president is not how he abolished slavery, but how a different one failed to tell a lie about chopping down a cherry tree. So
that's a good point. So kind of what I'm getting from you guys is that we're talking a lot about that these emphasis on different scandals in the different countries kind of highlights the morals that they find more important, which makes sense. That's one of the more clear-cut questions and answers that we've had on the show this season. So we're getting pretty close to our time, so I want to wrap up by talking about some solutions for the future. So I kind of want to just go through one by one on our panel here, and then I also want to end talking to our friends from Louisiana one more time. And the last question that I want to leave our viewers with your answers to is the question of where do we go in the future? Do we need heavier consequences in our country for these infractions? Should there be different levels of consequences depending on the infraction? What should the punishment of these scandals look like in the future? Claire, I'm going to go ahead and start with you.
Well, I think that we need to figure out the varying degrees of these scandals. Like, in my opinion, a president that's accused of something like Watergate versus a president like Clinton, who was accused of a sex scandal. They both faced a similar punishment in terms of getting impeached. However, granted, Clinton's didn't go as far as Nixon, but the relative character and those values, I think, need to be evaluated, and the consequences should be based on that.
Felix, your closing words?
I agree with Claire that we should establish a ranking system for which actions we consider to be the worst and which aren't that bad, which are a slap on the wrist and which is an impeachment. And we have it known. We have a book written about it, if you will. We know exactly what we're going to give for punishment for this action if they're found guilty. And I think another thing we need to do is establish who did it. And I'm not saying the media needs to do this, because they're not an effective way of doing this. This needs to be within the government. These committees need to be more effective in what they're trying to do. They need to establish exactly whose fault it was so that they can take them out of office and replace them with somebody who's going to do the job correctly. And I think that that's really a solution, is punish people harshly for harsh crimes, punish people weakly for weak crimes, but know exactly who committed the crime, who is at fault. And not through media, but through a genuinely effective source.
All right, David, your closing words.
I think we definitely need to address this issue, and both of you have hit on that really well. And one of the things that we're doing here right now is when they do commit these kinds of things, we let them resign, and that's it. We just kind of let them kind of back out and duck under everything, and just kind of not really have to face the consequences of their actions. And so I think there needs to be something beyond just losing your job if you're responsible for the death of people, or you're responsible for declining American morals.
All right, last of our student panelists joining us in the studio. Emily, your last thoughts.
I just think it's important to keep an eye on the spectrum. If a president is doing something that is against our moral code but does not affect his ability to be a good, capable president of the United States, then we should not punish him for that. But if he's doing something that affects his capability to be a good president, then it's important that we stop that and make it so that that action is not repeated.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you for joining me in the studio today. Thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Before we close, I want to go to our Skype guests, Mason and Christian, and get your guys' last thoughts on what the punishment for these sorts of scandals should look like in the future.
Well, the thing is, it's easy to point fingers and say what's wrong with America and that things need to be fixed. But it comes difficult when actually deciding what needs to be done to be fixed, because it's difficult. You don't know. There's varying punishments. There's varying degrees of scandals and things that people are doing wrong. It's just hard to figure out where we're going to draw the line with impeachment and, like, slap on the wrist.
And definitely before deciding punishments, we talk about, having a moral code or a moral standard that we hold to people, but the thing is, we assume these things a lot, as if, if somebody says they're a family man, we're basically saying, all right, I'm going to hold you to these standards that I have in my head, and as long as you don't go against those, that I'm not going to blame you, even though you've never even told me that, you hold these moral codes. And while we often say that morals are going away in politics and morals are going away in general, we just need to realize that morals are changing. Professional lives and personal lives are starting to separate, and before we decide punishments, we need to decide where we can put people on a moral spectrum, and frankly, there's no way to find, a universal moral code. It's definitely a matter of looking at it on a personal level, but also making sure we know how people are going to react in a situation.
Great, thank you for that. Thank you, Christian, Mason, for being on the show. It really added a new element, and it was great to get some other perspective outside of our Roaring Fork Valley where we live to kind of contribute to the show. So thank you guys so much for appearing. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having us. Thank you so much.
All right, and thank you to our live audience and our audience who are watching on our live stream on the Be Heard TV Facebook page for tuning in. I hope that you'll tune in, not next week. Next week we'll actually be on a break. We have our spring break next week, but the following Tuesday we will have another show, and I hope that you will join us. I hope you'll join us then. So thank you for watching tonight, and we hope to see you soon. Good night.